Several weeks ago, my husband, whose name is Kyle, this is relevant for the story, and I were sitting at the breakfast table together when, out of nowhere, he doubled over laughing. In between guffaws, he wordlessly passed me his phone and showed me an AI-generated transcription of a voicemail he had just received. It said, "Good morning, child. This is Jackie Performers and Underconductorial Company, and Ralph, the General Pest Control Show. Should be there between 8:30 and 8:40, thank you very much." The message was from our exterminator, who was scheduled to arrive for an annual inspection and very sadly not a general pest control show, whatever that may be. He was also tragically named neither Jackie Performers nor Ralph, though I do now frequently greet my child with a cheery, "Good morning, child." I still have no idea what an underconductorial company might be. If you have any idea, please let me know. But setting aside the many worthy debates about the merits and dangers of AI, at the very least, that morning, it gave us a good laugh. In this wild world we live in, full of unreliable AI-generated media and news headlines so preposterous they sound like they could be AI-generated, but aren't, it can be hard to know what to believe. Truth seems to be, at best, an amorphous concept these days. What even is truth? Whose version of the truth are we talking about? The world around us feels so unpredictable and unreliable, many of us move through it with our hackles up, running everything we read or hear through a filter of hardy suspicion. The disciples on Easter morning were no exception. As they staggered to the tomb, heavy with exhaustion and grief, they were greeted by the preposterous news that the stone had been rolled away, the body was missing, and Jesus was gone. In their fog of despair, that information probably didn't land right away. And I can only imagine how this news got distorted as it filtered through the first century rumor mill. By the time the story was twice removed from the eyewitnesses, it probably made about as much sense as a general pest control show performed by an underconductorial company. The stone was what? Jesus is where? Now, setting aside the unreliable nature of oral storytelling and the inevitable game of telephone that ensues, it is also the case that when we don't understand something, when we are confronted by a mystery that exceeds our capacity to figure out, we often start to fill in the blanks ourselves, to resolve the ambiguity that we can't handle. So no wonder then that in all four gospel accounts of the resurrection, the predominant reaction to the news that Christ is risen is basically everything but the joy that we have come to associate with Easter morning. There is fear, confusion, grief, disbelief, and yes, suspicion. Because when we have experienced trauma, whether that is the gut punch of the gruesome public execution of someone we love and revere, or the slower, relentless grind of daily bad news that never seems to end, we easily and appropriately become very distrustful of anything that might seem like good news. We look for the catch. We obsessively check the facts. We wonder what this good news might cost us. We keep it at arm's length because painful past experience has taught us that if something seems too good to be true, well, it probably is. So when Jesus approaches Mary as she stands weeping in the garden, it is small wonder that she doesn't recognize him at first. There is no universe in which her brain associates the empty tomb with Jesus being alive again. Her assumption is that someone mislaid or has more likely stolen the body. An insult on top of an already grievous injury. The fact that Jesus is risen has simply not occurred to her yet. But Jesus persists. Somehow, he cuts through her grief and anxiety. He calls her by name, and in that moment, he makes contact. The gears clunk into place. She recognizes Jesus, her friend, her teacher, her God. And all of a sudden, it doesn't matter anymore that the story doesn't make sense. The resurrection is like that. It is the blade that can cut through the thicket of suspicion that has grown up around our hearts, that can free us from the prisons of despair and paranoia that we construct for ourselves. It is the good news that is too good to be true, and yet somehow, miraculously, thank God, is true anyway. It is the hope that doesn't make the least bit of rational sense and yet is a lifeline when we are drowning. It is the gasp of fresh air amidst the suffocating hall of death, the tiny pinprick of flame in the overwhelming darkness. The resurrection puts joy back on the map, not by erasing any of the other emotions we might be experiencing, but by coexisting alongside them. The risen Christ pierces the armor that we have put up around our hearts with his gaze of unconditional love. And that moment of holy recognition between Jesus and Mary in the garden is not just an exchange that happened once 2,000 years ago. It is an ongoing process by which the risen one restores us to ourselves, reminding us who we are and whose we are. When we are trapped in fear and suspicion, Jesus looks us in the eye and calls us by name, 1,000 times if necessary, until we shake loose from the ties that constrain us and remember that above all, we belong to God. The point of the resurrection is not that we throw caution to the winds and start gullibly believing everything we hear. Nor is the point that suddenly everything is fine. There is no bad news anymore. The point, the reason we are here today and the reason we are able to be Christians at all is that there is always, always more to the story than meets the eye. When we think it's over and done, God turns the page. Even in the suffocating darkness of the tomb, there is always hope. And when we are so locked in suspicion and despair that we start to believe otherwise, that's when we need the resurrection the most. Friends, Easter is for the broken, the fearful, the grieving, the hopeless. Easter is for us, not because everything is fine, but because we are desperate for a flicker of hope that God is not done with us yet. Easter hope is no trivial thing. The deeper the darkness around us, the more urgently we need the hope of the resurrection to guide and sustain us. So, dear friends, my prayer for all of us on this beautiful Easter morning is that the risen one might meet us where we are, catch our gaze, call us by name, and lead us to the hope that surpasses all understanding. Happy Easter, beloveds. Amen.